Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second hearing for SB 673, Track 2. We are so glad you're here today. My name is Sam Kober, and I serve as a public participation specialist for the Department of Toxic Substances Control, Berkeley Regional Office. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to let our Spanish-speaking participants know that we have simultaneous interpretation available here on Zoom. I'm going to give the instructions in English, and then the interpreters will give them in Spanish. To participate fully in the meeting, everyone on Zoom must select a language, either English or Spanish. Hover your mouse at the toolbar at the bottom of the screen and select the globe icon. Then choose your language of choice. If you do not see the globe icon, click the three dots for more tools. The interpretation globe will be in the list that pops up. For those joining from a smartphone, look for the same three dots at the bottom of your screen. You may have to scroll to the left or to the right. Click on them and then select the same globe and choose your language of choice. To participate in the meeting fully, everyone on Zoom must select a language, either English or Spanish. I'll pause a moment for our interpreters.
Thank you so much, Sam. Muy buenas tardes a todos ustedes. Gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy en esta reunión. En esta reunión tenemos servicios de interpretación para que pueda escuchar el intérprete en vivo. En la parte inferior de su pantalla en su computadora, por favor, vaya a la parte de abajo en el icono donde está en forma de un mundo, presionarlo y elegir el idioma de su preferencia. En este caso sería español. Una vez que lo elija, favor de presionarlo nuevamente para elegir audio en silencio y así puede escuchar al intérprete en vivo y en directo. Ahora, por el otro lado, si está utilizando un teléfono, va a haber tres puntitos en la parte de arriba, en la parte derecha, y va a seguir los mismos pasos. Elegir interpretación, elegir español para que pueda escuchar toda esa reunión en su totalidad en español. Si tiene algún problema técnico, favor de alzar su mano o escribirlo en el chat y con mucho gusto lo acompañaremos para resolverlo. Que tenga una muy buena reunión y seguimos adelante con ello. Back to you, Sam. Thank you so much.
I'm going to give everyone just a moment to select their language, making sure you have to select either English or Spanish to fully engage in the meeting today. Alrighty, thank you so much. Welcome again. My name is Sam Kober, and I'm a public participation specialist for the Department of Toxic Substances Control. Today's hearing is hosted by the Department of Toxic Substances Control, also known as DTSC, in order to receive your public comment on the proposed rulemaking action for updated hazardous waste facility permit criteria for additional community protections, commonly called SB 673 Track 2. I will explain how you will leave your comment before the formal hearing starts. This hearing is being recorded and will be available to view later on DTSC's YouTube channel, DTSC Green. Today's agenda includes an introduction of our presenter and our hearing officer, followed by an overview of SB 673 Track 2 before we begin the public hearing. The hearing officer will formally open the hearing and record the start time. Only then will we begin to receive your public comments. The hearing officer will then close the hearing and record the closing time. The end of the public comment period has been extended from January 26th to today, February 3rd. Be sure to subscribe to the SB 673 e-list to be notified of any updates. We will provide links to all these information sources in the Zoom chat right now. Please note that the recording of this hearing could take up to a week to be uploaded. Now, let us begin with some introductions. In case you joined late, my name is Sam Kober, and I serve as a DTSC Public Participation Specialist. We are joined today by Lauren Steinbaum, DTSC Project Manager for SB 673 Track 2. Our hearing officer is Muzja Feroz, DTSC Branch Chief for our Hazardous Waste Management Program. I would like to introduce our first presenter, Lauren Steinbaum, the SB 673 Project Manager. I will now hand it over to Lauren to begin the overview.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here with us today. My name is Lauren Steinbaum, and I am a senior hazardous substances engineer within the permitting division at DTSC. As Sam mentioned, I'm the project manager for SB 673 Track 2. We appreciate your ongoing engagement in the department's development of these regulations. The legislature asked the department to consider developing permit criteria on community vulnerability and existing health risks and minimum setback distances. And we have gone through many years of symposiums, community workshops, and draft regulatory frameworks. In 2021, DTSC proposed a draft regulatory framework and asked for public input. The public input received on the 2021 draft framework led DTSC to revise its proposed regulatory framework. Most recently, the department published 3 information sheets that shared the revised regulatory framework that guided the development of the proposed regulations. In 2024 and 2025, we presented these information sheets in Board of Environmental Safety meetings and received input through those meetings, as well as via an online survey and through email. Information on our past activities related to SB 673 Track 2 can be found on our webpage, dtsc.ca.gov/SB 673 Permit Criteria Community Protection. We want to recognize the effort people have put into reviewing our proposals and providing feedback. All of your input throughout this process has guided the development of our proposed regulations that are the basis for today's meeting. We look forward to your continued engagement with the proposed regulations as we move through the formal rulemaking process under the Administrative Procedure Act. The comments you provide today will help guide the final rulemaking package. Those who participate in today's hearing and who provide contact information will be informed should the department make any changes to the proposed regulation text. The department will respond to every single public comment that is received. The comments and our response to comments will be included in the final rulemaking package. I am now turning things back to Sam Kober.
So much, Lauren. If you wish to submit written comments during today's hearing, you may do so at any time. If submitting a written comment via Zoom, please use the chat feature and begin your comment by writing your first and last name and affiliation. The comments submitted through the chat feature on Zoom will be considered official written comments. At the end of this hearing, you can still email written comments to regs@dtsc.ca.gov until 11:59 p.m. today, February 3rd, 2026. The proposed regulation and the email will be put in the chat right now. These regulations were duly noticed in the California Regulatory Notice Registrar, and copies of the notice, proposed regulations, and the initial statement of reasons were made available to interested parties who requested them. A link to where these materials are posted is also on the Department of Toxic Substances Control's website. For this rulemaking process, commenters are called witnesses, and your comments are considered testimony. Testimony will be heard in the order you raise your hands. If you are a Spanish speaker, please introduce yourself and then pause. The interpreter will give you further instructions. Once the formal hearing has begun, you will raise your hand on Zoom to show you wish to speak. To make sure that we have enough time to hear from all witnesses, testimony per speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. For Spanish speakers, you will have 10 minutes to have time for interpretation. The slides being presented will change to show when you have 1 minute remaining for your comment. When you are commenting, please begin by stating your name and your affiliation or the organization you represent. If applicable, please then indicate the proposed regulatory section that each comment addresses. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Mujda Feroz, our hearing officer, to begin the formal hearing.
Thank you, Sam. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your presence in this space today. My name is Mujda Feroz. I'm the Permitting Branch Chief at the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and I will be the hearing officer for today's proceedings. For the record, today is February 3rd, 2026, and the time is now 5:12 p.m. Under the provisions of the Administrative Procedure Act, this is the time and place set for the presentation of statements, arguments, and contentions orally or in writing for or against the changes in the Department of Toxic Substances Control regulations for the regulations package titled Updated Hazardous Waste Facility Permit Criteria for Additional Community Protections. This is also commonly referred to as SB 673 Track 2. It amends Title 22, Division 4.5, Sections 66260.10 and 66270.14, and adding sections 66271.22 and 66271.80 of the California Code of Regulations. The entire proceedings will be recorded and transcribed. The recording, as well as any exhibits or evidence presented at this hearing, will be incorporated into the rulemaking file and will be reviewed prior to final approval of the regulations by the Department and the Office of Administrative Law. The purpose of today's hearing is to accept public comments that will be part of the official rulemaking file. Witnesses presenting testimony at the hearing will not be sworn in. Comments made today orally or in writing will not be responded to at this time, but will be addressed in writing in the final statement of reasons. We ask that you restrict your comments to the regulations being considered today. I will now hand it over to Sam to facilitate the comments.
Thank you so much, Mujda. James Gambrell, a member of our team, will call on people in the order they have raised their hand. He will say the name associated with your account and ask you to unmute. For anyone who joined via the Zoom phone number, please dial *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute when prompted. Please begin by stating your name and affiliation or organization you represent. Is there anyone who would like to comment? Please raise your hand now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James Gambrell, and I am one of the public participation specialists for the Department of Toxic Substances Control. As we get started, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of the day to participate in this hearing. Please note, as Sam has mentioned earlier, you will have 5 minutes to share your comments or testimony. If you watch the slide on the screen, it will change to show when you have 1 minute left. This is for your convenience. And also, this is so everyone attending can have a chance to give testimony. We can go back to anyone, if time is left, who wants to expand on their testimony. Sam, the witness identified as Rebecca Overmy has requested to give testimony. Witness Rebecca Overmy, you will have 5 minutes. I will unmute you now.
Oh, wow. Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, if you could please state your name for the record, any affiliation or organization you're with, or just self, and your testimony. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So there's no presentation tonight of the proposed rules?
This is a hearing to receive testimony regarding the SB 673 Track 2.
Oh, okay. So, wow. Okay, I thought there would be a presentation since this has been, anyway, okay. I'll start. My name is Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez, and I coordinate the Clean Air Coalition of North Whittier and Avocado Heights. a grassroots environmental justice organization in Southeast LA County. I just want to briefly explain my being flustered. It's been many years since we've heard from DTSC about this proposed rulemaking. So I was expecting that there would be some formal presentation of the proposal. So and I have to say, I'm disappointed that we don't have the opportunity to hear directly from folks at DTSC the rationale behind these proposed rules. So I'll forge ahead, but I wanted to register my perplexity and disappointment that we're doing it in this format. Anyway, I want to start with a question. What are permits for? I mean, why should we bother to do all this work to require that a hazardous waste facility have a permit to operate at all? Let's pause for a moment to imagine a world without any permits required for polluters. I'm sure the industry representatives here with us today are thinking this would be great, but I caution you to be careful what you wish for, because the logical outcome of this permitless scenario is a world so destroyed that it becomes unlivable for everyone. This means that permits that regulate pollution are good for everyone, but they are especially good for the communities stuck with hazardous waste facilities, typically for decades. This is such an unjust situation, this being stuck living next to a place like Quimetco or Fibertech, while other communities never even have to imagine such a terrible situation and instead benefit from the fact that gross polluters are over there contaminating particular places as sacrifice zones for the benefit of what we call the greater good. Such a grave injustice requires the strongest, most health protective regulation of polluters possible in order to approach real justice for overburdened communities. Over a decade ago, the legislature, responding to DTSC's utter failure to protect the communities around Exide, told DTSC to do just that, to develop and implement improved, more protective permitting requirements by July 2018. But not only did DTSC not comply with the law's clear timeline, but the agency's proposed rules before us today are pitifully inadequate to the overarching task of environmental justice. I won't detail all the weaknesses in this draft rulemaking here. We will be submitting written comments as well. And so I won't do that here, but because I want to focus instead on our recommendations for strengthening these rules. So Clean Air Coalition recommends 3 major changes, among other smaller ones, but these are the 3 I want to highlight tonight. First, hire third-party independent researchers to conduct robust assessments of the cumulative impacts of pollution in vulnerable communities using the most current science of cumulative impacts. Second, work collaboratively with vulnerable communities to collect the relevant data for these assessments of harm. And third, and very importantly, use the agency's authority to deny permits to facilities in communities demonstrably overburdened by cumulative impacts. Enough is enough. Do the right thing and protect public health, not polluters. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you for your testimony. Witness identified as Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez. We thank you for your time. The next witness has identified themselves as Carolyn Farrell. Please unmute, state your name for the record, any affiliation or organization, and your testimony. I will now unmute you. You have 5 minutes.
I think you sent the unmute to the wrong person because I received it and I'm not Caroline.
Got you. Looks like it may have gone to the wrong person. Okay. We'll come back to Caroline once she raises her hand to make sure everyone has time. The witness identified as Andrea Ventura.
Andrea Ventura.
Please state your name for the record, any affiliation, and your testimony. You'll have 5 minutes.
Yes, hi. My name is Andrea Ventura. I am the Legislative and Policy Director for Clean Water Action and Clean Water Fund. And full transparency, I do not live in an impacted community. I have that privilege not to. But Clean Water Action is very concerned about what's happening with this permit criteria. I am not going to go over some of the things that you've already heard or what others will speak to in terms of the specifics of what they are calling for, because I think the folks that represent the communities themselves should have that voice, and that's what should be heard. What I want to focus on is the frustration that we signed on to comments about frustration about the process and what we're getting in the end, having been very involved back in the day when the DTSC reform was a major conversation in the state legislature and the laws, SB 673 and others were passed. We should not be having to come back and have some of the same complaints. At that time, DTSC, and first let me say, there are people at DTSC that get up in the morning and come to work wanting to do and doing their best. The job is to protect our communities and the people of our state. I'm sure there are people that are trying to do that. But the department as a whole has not reflected that. It has a long history of not enforcing its own rules, not setting the proper rules, and following up aggressively to put communities first and their health and their safety. None of us are guinea pigs here. And so to come back and find so many flaws where we're seeing everything we were trying to achieve back in the legislature and what more importantly, what the legislature and the governor of the state was telling DTSC to do, to look at cumulative impacts, to look at the various sources of contamination around specific hazardous waste facilities that could impact the community, to really hear the community's voices and solutions, and to not see that happening is very frustrating. We were very disappointed just recently to see that some of the recommendations from communities were not only ignored for the hazardous waste plan, but were also the plan was praised in a press release by DTSC on their website, saying that the community voices had been heard when almost every community member criticized the plan. So you're not really listening to these folks who are living this every day. I'm going to end by one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to the communities. One of the things we make clear in our letter is that you need to be looking at the various exposure endpoints for communities when you are considering how you permit a hazardous waste facility. We must do that. I work in the water world with the water board. They have to do that. If they didn't, all of us, whether you're in a highly impacted, polluted community, whether you work for industry or whether you work for DTSC, would be drinking contaminated water. DTSC needs to follow that lead and live up to this, because we do not want to go back to the legislature and try to fix you again. Thank you.
We thank you for your testimony. Witness identified as Andrea Ventura. The next witness has identified themselves as Leticia Casillas. I will unmute you. Please state your name, organization. Oh, looks like Looks like she jumped away here. There's Leticia. Leticia Casillas Lucan. I will unmute you. Please state your name for the record, any organization or affiliation, and your testimony. You will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
great. No, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leticia. I'm a staff attorney with California Rural Legal Assistance. We represent El Pueblo para el Aire y Agua Limpia, a community group from Kettleman City that neighbors a hazardous waste facility. So I will be providing public comments on their behalf. We urge DTSC to significantly revise the draft to truly protect the health of vulnerable communities near hazardous waste facilities. From the list of comments we submitted, we want to underscore two major things. The first one is that the cancer risk threshold should be 1 in a million, and the non-cancer hazardous index should not be greater than 1. The second is that you should require all hazardous waste facilities proposing modifications to or applying for post-closure permits to conduct health risk assessments. So to my first point, the cancer risk threshold, sorry, I have like something in my throat. I apologize. So the cancer risk threshold should be at least 1 in a million, and the non-cancer hazard index cannot be greater than 1. We believe that this is more health protective than the proposed cancer risk of 1 out of 10,000. And we also believe that if facilities cannot meet this, then their permits should be denied. The cancer risk threshold should be protective because of the high cancer rates are not just statistics for communities living near hazardous waste facilities. They are literally their daily reality. And many residents of Kettleman City have family members and neighbors who have battled or died from cancer. So to truly protect the health of nearby residents, DTSC should require facilities to mitigate any cancer risk, at least below the 1 in 1 million. And to my second point, DTSC should require all hazardous waste facilities proposing modifications to or applying for post-closure permits to conduct health risk assessments. A closed facility continues to pose a human health risk because if the hazardous waste that it still contains is emitted or discharged at any time, that could reach residents. Residents of Kettleman City have voiced serious concerns about the potential health contamination resulting from these closed facilities, as they must endure the consequences indefinitely. Therefore, it is essential to require health risk assessments for facilities that are seeking post-closure permits. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Witness identified as Leticia Casillas Lucan. I just wanted to take a quick step back and drop in the chat a link to the package for any of those that were looking for information. Our next witness, identified as Carolyn Farrell. I will ask you to unmute. Please state your name and affiliation and your testimony. I will go ahead and unmute you. You will have 5 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Caroline Farrell. With the Environmental Law and Justice Clinic at Golden Gate University. And earlier this evening, I submitted some comments on the draft rule on behalf of Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice, the California Environmental Justice Coalition, the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project, West Berkeley Alliance for Clean Air and Safe Jobs, Tri-Valley Cares, and Fresno's Against Fracking. In general, the comments urge DTSC to revise the draft rulemaking. As written, it does not comply with the requirements of SB 673, which were really to incorporate criteria related to cumulative impacts, increase the transparency and standardization and environmental protectiveness of DTSC's policies and procedures around permitting, and to improve the protectiveness for health and environmental justice communities during the permitting process. And the rulemaking has not achieved those goals and is disappointing after over a decade of waiting. In particular, there are a couple of things I would want to highlight from our comments. In terms of the pre-application requirements, throughout the process of workshopping and collecting information to go into this rulemaking, it's been pretty universally commented from multiple stakeholders, from impacted communities to even the regulated entities, business community, and local government, that the applicant should not be the one conducting any pre-application meeting. In order for that to be a meaningful opportunity for public participation and to strengthen the ability of impacted communities to participate in the process and provide information, it needs to be done by a neutral third party, DTSC perhaps, but somebody with the skill and the expertise to facilitate community meetings that give community members, true opportunities to discuss and document their lived experience in the community and fill any gaps in publicly available data. Another issue is regarding the health risk management based on the sensitive receptor setback in proposed change to section 66271.80. The health risk range is inappropriate and unclear why it was selected. The initial statement of reasons cites to CERCLA's National Contingency Plan as where this range comes from. However, this range applies to contaminated site cleanup standards, and it's not used for permitting. And even as a threshold, it's not even a threshold for cleanups. It's a screening value that's used for further investigation. So utilizing it in this context is arbitrary without additional information and a basis for why that would be appropriate. In addition, it's a very high threshold that would leave the community more vulnerable than a health protective threshold that is actually based on the exposure to the community. In addition, that section is the only area where DTSC mentions any changes to its procedures and policies related to notices of deficiency. This has been a long time issue with communities living near hazardous waste landfills. For example, in Chem Waste's situation in Kettleman City, they have had an indefinite extension of their 2003 permit. They're still operating under that permit because DTSC has issued so many notices of deficiency on their 2013 application that they've de facto gotten double the amount of time. And now they're up for a new permit renewal. This is unacceptable, and DTSC needs to include better provisions around its notices of determination. The amount of discretion DTSC thinks it has is just unwarranted by SB 673. Thank you.
Witness identified as Carolyn Farrell, we thank you for your comment. Witness identified as Jaime Sanchez, I will unmute you. Please state your name for the record, any affiliation or organization. You will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Jaime Sanchez. I am a resident of Los Nietos and a member of Neighbors Against Fibertech. What is the common denominator here today? For the toxic substances industry, it is profit at the expense of the public, communities, and the environment. For DTSC, it is historic and ongoing malfeasance. That is, the failure to fulfill their mandate to protect the public, communities, and the environment in favor of the toxic substances industry. For the legislature in 2015, it was approval of SB 673 to counter DTSC's historic malfeasance. The legislative intent of SB 673 is clear and unambiguous. That is, establish a criteria to enhance community protections. How? SB 673 specifically states in pertinent part, the department shall consider for inclusion as criteria all of the following: number and types of past violations that will result in a denial, the vulnerability and existing health risks to nearby populations, including cumulative impacts, minimum setback distances from sensitive receptors such as schools, child care facilities, residences, hospitals, elder care facilities, and other sensitive locations, enhanced public involvement and integration of public concerns into permitting decisions. SB 673 required DTSC to comply by January 1st, 2018. DTSC failed to comply. DTSC has also failed to establish a threshold to be implemented in cases of denial and revocation of permits for the most egregious violators. Consider Exide, where DTSC had the actual authority to revoke its permit but failed to do so. Consider Fibertech and Ecobat, where DTSC granted permit approval despite horrendous records. Consider DTSC's claim that it lacked sufficient evidence to deny or revoke these permits while failing to apply existing criteria and ignore the facts. These are clear and convincing examples of DTSC's non-compliance with established criteria, resulting in its failure to fulfill their mandate. And now consider DTSC's proposed updated permit criteria that lacks community protections by failing to identify and or address cumulative impacts and potential risks to human health and the environment. The proposed rule does not enhance long-established protections. It dilutes them by failing to include valid and essential policy measures identified in SB 673 needed to protect vulnerable communities from the innumerable dangers posed by toxic substances. Therefore, Neighbors Against Fibertech respectfully request that DTSC revise the proposed rule and take into careful consideration valid concerns of the environmental justice community and incorporate these essential safeguards in order to enhance criteria protections and fulfill your mandate. Thank you.
Witness identified as Jaime Sanchez, we thank you so very much for your testimony. We'll now move to the next witness, identified as Ivana Castellanos. I will unmute you. Please remember to state your name for the record, any affiliation or organization. You will have 5 minutes to give your testimony. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ivana Castellanos, and I'm speaking with Physicians for Social Responsibility, Los Angeles. SB 673 was a clear directive from the legislature. DTSC was asked to strengthen hazardous waste permitting by meaningfully incorporating cumulative impacts into decision-making. But these proposed regulations completely miss that goal. The proposal ultimately preserves the existing framework, making slight tweaks here and there, requiring applicants to do some additional paperwork without making any fundamental improvements to DTSC's decision-making criteria. It continues to rely on facility-specific health risk assessments without requiring a robust analysis of the broader pollution burden that communities are already facing. This was the whole point. DTSC has ignored feedback from the public that industry should not be the ones to lead community engagement efforts, and feedback that the public does not want to rely on industry-collected data. DTSC was required by law to establish clear standards and procedures for permit revocation and denial, but these rules fail to provide any clear guardrails for how assessment of cumulative impacts would actually be meaningfully integrated into decision making. We continue to ask DTSE, when is enough enough? We want a permitting process that demonstrates not just willingness, but the agency's responsibility to issue a permit revocation or denial when it would place the public's health at risk. Despite the information sheet misleadingly labeled setback distance, the proposed rule does not establish any clear minimum setback distances. The reliance on CalEnviroscreen is also inappropriate. The tool is absolutely not designed to measure cumulative risks for a specific neighborhood or area. It contains specific indicators and data for the purpose of providing some kind of understanding of the relative cumulative burden, but it does not contain all local data that would be relevant. It's not designed to assess cumulative risks of a specific neighborhood, and it cannot capture the full reality of lived exposure. You know this, the processes should incorporate community-based ground truthing or data collection, as community and health advocates have repeatedly requested. The removal of the requirement for an HRA work plan and agency approval of that methodology also weakens transparency and accountability and reduces confidence that the agency has provided oversight in evaluating the methods and assumptions to assess health risks. Which we know can vary greatly depending on who you ask and who they're being paid for. This is the way of industry-funded science. The cancer risk and hazard index thresholds in your risk management framework are in no way protective of public health. And to address this process, releasing these long-delayed regulations immediately before a major holiday and having the comment period span across Christmas and New Year's after years of delay on DTSC's end completely undermines public trust and demonstrates very little care about our participation. We have repeatedly asked for more engagement on this issue. DTSC ignored feedback that the information sheets were not sufficient, that they lacked the context needed for the public to understand its content and meaningfully engage. DTSC also ignored repeated requests for the draft rule before initiating the formal comment period, and all feedback that was given on these information sheets was ultimately ignored. The information sheets didn't have to be updated. They remain unchanged because, once again, none of our feedback was incorporated. Engagement is more than checking a box, and the performance of holding these hearings where our comments are duly noted but ultimately ignored. We've submitted a written letter with more detailed comments signed by 17 community groups, environmental justice advocates, and allies. And I continue to invite DTSC to engage with us on this issue. Thank you.
Witness identified as Ivana Castellanos, we thank you so very much for your time tonight and for sharing your testimony. The next witness with her hand raised is identified as Jenny Knack. I will unmute you. You will have 5 minutes. Please state your name, affiliation, and you will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, Jenny Knack, Parents Against SSFL. I'll start out with an opening statement just to clarify how I feel about where we're at. There are no additional identifiable protections to the community proposed in this rulemaking. So even the heading of the screen I'm looking at is misleading, and it's extremely frustrating to just walk this process through, to be completely honest, because there's a trend in the documents that are being released by DTSC. They're boldly refusing to do what's been mandated by the legislature. In this case, evaluate cumulative impacts on communities. Again, DTSC is planning to shirk its responsibilities and place the determination of whether or not a community is impacted in the hands, and to what extent, in the hands of the ones most likely to benefit from ignoring or denying those impacts. This simply cannot continue, and these regs must be significantly revised. While the SSFL is a location for site remediation, it's still a relevant topic for discussion, because we can see there clearly what happens when the entity responsible for the generation and cleanup of waste is allowed to determine the impacts on public health. Boeing's been allowed to perpetuate the lie that contamination doesn't migrate off-site, which flies in the face of a mountain of independent studies, reports, and investigations, but it saves them money. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the consequences of allowing the generator of hazardous materials to determine and measure the impacts that very same business is only and always going to lead to the minimization and denial of those impacts. And as we who live around these polluted sites and these polluted corporations know very well, it's the communities that carry the burden of the very real costs to our health. The same costs that DTSC continues to refuse to acknowledge or even attempt to tally. To complicate matters more, DTSC proposes these regs declaring they're opting out of a scientific peer review compliance in the same breath. Well, isn't that interesting? They're proposing that industry be given the responsibility to evaluate impacts to public health, and they don't want to hear what objections could be raised regarding that decision by the independent scientific community. Unfortunately, the BES board also doesn't want to dig into DTSC science. And neither do the judges who determine the verdicts when we attempt to sue DTSC over their baloney industry-skewed science. And the legislature also doesn't want to get into the scientific weeds either. So here we are once again, talking about handing the henhouse of cumulative impacts to the foxes of industry without any safeguards established whatsoever that require, not consider, but require the establishment of cumulative impacts to communities and that prioritize the protection of the public. So regarding the determining acceptable cancer risks, even if it's being arbitrarily and inappropriately applied to permitting, I think it needs to be acknowledged again formally in this process that the 1 in a million goal, that's the 1 in a million cancer risk is the goal established by EPA, and 1 in 10,000 is the lowest threshold allowed. So citing the lowest threshold as the bar for DTSC's goal in these regs is a deregulatory effect. It contrasts starkly with the claim that these proposed regs are providing any additional protection to communities. It's instead lowering the standards. Please listen to us and significantly revise these regs to comply with the orders set forth in SB 673. Thank you.
Your testimony tonight is very important. Witness identified as Jenny Knack, and everyone, we thank you for taking the time to deliver your testimony and comments. The witness identified as Angela Johnson Mazaros. I will unmute you. Please state your name for the record, any affiliation or organization, and your testimony. You will have 5 minutes. I will unmute you now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Angela Johnson Mazaros. I'm with Earth Justice, and I'm not commenting on behalf of any particular client. I want to make 3 points here. First, I want to talk a little bit about this public hearing. Second, I want to talk about how this rule fails at its fundamental purpose, which was to provide community protections. And third, I want to close by talking about how DTSC should move this process forward. So first, it continues to be shocking to me that DTSC holds what it calls a public hearing while refusing to allow those people who are commenting, because they are the deepest stakeholders most impacted by these decisions, to appear during the meeting. We are literally a black box, highlighting the invisibility that DTSC attaches to the community members and their allies commenting to this agency. Instead of seeing our faces and responding to our voices, we look at a screen emblazoned with the comment that this is about giving communities additional protections, when in fact, the rulemaking does nothing of the sort. In particular, the legislature recognized, as it looked at the vast landscape of DTSC's failures to provide protections that are required by law and decency to frontline communities, that the agency must deal with cumulative impacts. The legislature required DTSC to do so because it is clear that human beings do not live impacted by single source after single source. Rather, we live in an environment where all the sources cumulatively impact our health, our safety, and quality of life. And yet, this rule does nothing to address cumulative impacts. Indeed, it does not even collect the information of all of the things that are impacting people who are also contending with having a hazardous waste facility in their neighborhood. This rule simply and fundamentally fails to protect communities and does not deliver on the task given to DTSC by the legislature. And because it does not address cumulative impacts, this rule does not meet the legal requirements of the law. There are many other things that we can talk about in the ways in which this proposed rulemaking fails to meet the requirements of 673. We have submitted, in combination with numerous organizations from around the state, a letter that outlines these things. So for the purposes of this call, I will close by noting DTSC is not strengthening environmental justice protections. They are not adding anything additional to what's already in the failed status quo. And DTSC has refused to partner with frontline communities as stakeholders who have important information and perspectives that should be included in this rulemaking. DTSC should go back to the starting board. It should try to build rather than destroy trust with frontline communities and propose a process that will allow for engagement that is meaningful and real and allows communities to be more than a simple black box howling to the wind about how our lives are not being protected and our voices are not being heard. Thank you.
Again, let me just state that the testimony we have received tonight is so very important. Witness identified as Angela Johnson Mizaros, we thank you for your testimony. I will now see if there are any hands raised. We have a witness identified as Christopher Laurent. I will unmute you. Please state your name, affiliation, and your testimony. I will now unmute you. You will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christopher Laurent. I'm a resident of Avocado Heights and a member of the Clean Air Coalition. So I didn't prepare any extensive notes, so I'm just gonna talk from my point of view. And in my community, we experience a lot of different sources of pollution. And this was well recognized by the lawmakers 10 years ago that decided to add a cumulative impact component to permitting those facilities. Unfortunately, DTSC has not included this this component. And there's one clear reason why it's not included. The reason is half of polluters in California will have to close down if we take this into account. Because pollution doesn't circulate in a vacuum. It's different sources, different pathways, and it aggregates. So I just want to make it clear that we need a cumulative impact assessment added to your new rules. Thank you.
Witness identified as Christopher Laurent, we thank you for your testimony. The next witness has identified themselves as Don Kepke. Again, I will unmute you. Please state your name for the record, your affiliation or organization, or just self. You will have 5 minutes. I will unmute you now.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Dawn Kepke on behalf of the California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance. We were pleased to have been able to participate in the additional hearing held a few weeks ago. So just adding a couple of additional comments for the record today, but doubling down, if I may, just on the ongoing concerns and importance of greater focus on local land use planning decisions that are continuing to enable sensitive receptors to be sited near permitted facilities and other industrial operations. Most permitted facilities that are in scope for this regulation have been in operation for decades and were sited away from residential and other sensitive receptors. Unfortunately, however, local land use planning agencies continue to allow residential and other sensitive receptors to be sited near and even up against these facility fence lines. The permitted facilities covered by the regulation are critical to California's ability to manage its hazardous waste, and yet this regulation paired with poor local land use planning decisions will have additional impacts on these facilities and California's ability to manage hazardous waste effectively. We also want to raise concern about the regulation relying on Cal EnviroScreen for a number of various provisions and decisions from a permitting perspective. As far as SEEB is aware, this approach would represent the first instance in which a state regulatory agency has relied on the use of Cal EnviroScreen to inform permitting decisions. SEEB, as DTSC may know, has been deeply engaged on the development of Cal EnviroScreen from its inception and through each of its subsequent updates. In that regard, SEEB can say with certainty that Cal EnviroScreen was not designed or intended for this purpose, and its application in this context raises significant methodological and legal concerns. Further, the regulation provides overly broad discretion to the department, such that in combination with Cal EnviroScreen's qualitative and census tract approach, it would subject permittees to inconsistent and potentially arbitrary regulatory impacts that may not be related to the facility's own impact. With regard to the human health risk assessment as required, we remain concerned that it lacks clarity, despite the fact that it will serve as a critical basis for mitigation measures, setbacks, and more. Additionally, when it comes to community vulnerability assessment as required in the regulation, we remain a bit unclear about how that will be used from a standpoint of a basis for permit denial under the regulation, or even mitigation related to that assessment, and would urge the department to ensure any mitigation must have nexus to the facility's impact. With regard to sensitive setbacks and, risk management ranges, SEEB is concerned that the risk management range is being established based on the National Contingency Plan for Cleanup of Contaminated Land under CERCLA. As we understand it, this risk management range relied upon is focused on cleanup targets, despite most facilities that are in the cleanup stage are often closed or closing. It is unclear if these ranges recognize and incorporate other statutory, regulatory, and permitting requirements for various impacts across other agency authorities for permitted facilities that would be in scope under this regulation and that would continue to be operational and complying with a myriad of other agency-related authorities, requirements, permit conditions, what have you. Finally, as it relates to the economic and fiscal impact assessment and overall Economic cost analysis, CBER continues to have concerns with the assertion that there will be no business or jobs eliminated, reduced, and no decrease in investment in the state. We continue to believe that more work should be done. Inevitably, the regulation will result in additional conditions and mitigation requirements being imposed on facilities. It could also result in facilities closing or relocating because of risk reduction requirements, as well as potential for result in permit denials. We appreciate the opportunity, and we have submitted written comments and look forward to further conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for comment. Witness identified as Don Kepke. I'll now look to see if we have any other hands raised. If any other witnesses would like to give testimony. I do not see any hands raised. If there are any previous witnesses that would like to expand on their testimony, now would be a good time to raise your hand and add any additional testimony or comment to your testimony. I do see the witness identified as Angela Johnson with a hand raised. Again, I will unmute. Please state your name once again for the record. I know you've done it in the past, but since this is a formal hearing, we do ask that you state your name, organization, or affiliation again, and you will have 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is Angela Johnson-Mazaros from Earth Justice. And I just wanted to add a quick comment in response to the testimony provided by Don Kepke at SEED to note something that is incredibly important. The difficulty that communities experience with the location of facilities is not because local land use decision makers continue to permit these facilities. It is industry that comes forward and asks for a permit at a particular location. It's not the responsibility for the local land use authority to decline to grant that permit, although I would encourage them to always take that option as a prudent step. But this is a classic example of shifting responsibility away from where responsibility lies. The regulated community is making the decision to either place or continue their operations in places where they are unsafe and have negative impacts to those who are surrounding them. I encourage to urge DTSC to use the breadth of its legal authority to deny to approve industry's single-minded attempts to put their facilities wherever they see fit, regardless of the impacts of those who are surrounding them, either as a new facility or as the continuation of an existing facility. It may well have been that there was a time when it was appropriate for a facility to be located in a place that it currently exists, and that time may well have passed. And DTSC is supposed to be the state agency that stands with protecting public health and the environment from the impacts associated with recycling hazardous materials. And when a facility comes to DTSC for a permit in order to continue or begin an operation in a community, DTSC absolutely should be taken into account all the surrounding things that are impacting those community members and use its authority granted to it by state and federal law to decline to approve that permit, because it's clear that industry is not going to make those decisions to support frontline community health, safety, or quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you for your follow-up testimony, witness Angela Johnson Mazaros. Are there any, I want to give an opportunity to any other witnesses who would like to add comments to their previous testimony. And if anyone is on the telephone and wishes to give testimony, you can press star, is it star 6 or star 9? Can you help me out, Sam? I can't quite remember. Star 9 to raise your hand. And I'll identify you by the last 4 digits of your telephone number. And then star 6 to unmute. At this time, let the record show that no one else has raised their hand and there are no witnesses that wish to speak or give testimony.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you so much to everyone that commented. This concludes the witness testimony. With there being no more comments, I will hand it back to our hearing officer, Mujda, to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Sam. Let the records show that no one else raised their hand or indicated they wish to speak remotely. Therefore, we are closing the oral testimony portion of this hearing. It is now 6:08 p.m. on February 3rd, 2026. Let me remind you that written comments will be accepted until 11:59 p.m. today, February 3rd, 2026. Thank you all for attending the public hearing for the regulations package titled Updated Hazardous Waste Facility Permit Criteria for Additional Community Protections, commonly referred to as SB 673 Track 2. We really appreciate your time and feedback in the development of this regulation. I will hand it back to Sam.
Thank you so much, Mujda. We really appreciate and encourage your feedback. As a reminder, the public comment period has been extended from January 26th to today, February 3rd, 2026. All mail postmarked by 5 p.m. today to the DTSC Office of Legislation Regulatory Review has been accepted. You can still email comments to regs@dtsc.ca.gov until 11:59 p.m. today, February 3rd. Any further updates will be posted on the DTSC website. If you submit a comment, you will be sent the final updated regulation text. The comments and response to comments will be included in the final rulemaking package, which will also be posted on the public webpage. The web pages will be put in the Zoom chat right now. Again, thank you so much. Your feedback really matters to us. This concludes our second public hearing for SB 673 Track 2.